Hey everybody, welcome back to our weekly podcast with ChatArgos. My name is Patrick Tan, General Counsel for ChatArgos. With me, as usual, my partner in crime, Jonathan Reiter, our CEO and Chief Data Scientist. You'll know us. We were the ones who outed Binance's BUSD under collateralization by $1.4 billion. We've done a lot of work since then. You should check it out. But in today's episode, what are we going to talk about? We are going to talk a little bit about what the response was to our last episode, because that got quite a bit of response, a lot more than we thought we would. You guys seem really interested in some of the stuff that we said about Coinbase based on some of the laws that we've noticed that they may almost certainly be violating. Talk a little bit about the Tornado Cash indictment, what that means. No, it's not a crime just to put code out. That's not what the indictment says. We've read it. It's here. We've read it so you don't have to. But if you're going to comment about it, you might want to read it first. Then we'll talk a little bit about what this could possibly mean for Binance in terms of any sort of DOJ.
In general.
Or any exchange for that matter. Not just Coinbase, but not just Binance, but Binance most relevant because, that's one everybody's looking at. And then finally, we'll look at some of the TRON Smart Contract language. So it's going to get a bit technical. John's going to take us through that. But I think it's important that people know so that when you read these rants on Twitter, you can try to sift the wheat from the chaff, so to speak.
It's not just the transactions that are public, and people don't read a lot of things they should.
There is a lot of chaff out there. I just want to make that perfectly clear. So let's talk about Coinbase, because you guys responded in a big way to that on Twitter, on all social media, comments, everything. Thanks for all the support. Thanks for all the interaction. We appreciate that. That helps the algorithm, of course. But more importantly than that, talking about Coinbase, look, if you read the money transmitter licenses, if you read the legislation that this has to deal with, this is nothing about innovation. I mean, this has the crimes, well, the potential crimes or violations that are being committed have nothing to do with making. Here's the thing. This one really grinds my gears, John. Permissionless
Peter Griffin reference
and open source don't mean the same thing.
Well, beyond that, even none of this requires software or a computer. These rules are written the way they're written because they're supposed to be general. It's fine.
Okay, let me tell you, just as not even as a lawyer or as a human being, why the inability for some inexplicable reason to distinguish between permissionless and open source. Open source is, to use a simple analogy, anybody can find out the address of somebody else if they search in a directory, if your phone, if your number's listed, if you have a public address. So that's equivalent to open source. Anybody can know where that is. Now, permissionless is anybody can use my house as a to shoot up. If I'm going to swap my house to be a crack house, that's a crime.
It's an interesting. You'll certainly get in trouble. Whether or not, there's a problem. Yes. Okay.
It's a problem for me to say, all you crackheads, all you dopeheads can come by to my place, shoot up, get high. All the facilities are here. Have at it.
No, it's a fair point. I mean, no one is really complaining that what these guys have done is wrong because they've published certain sorts of code or algorithms or whatever. This is going to come up a bit later. The issue here is that, you have to understand exactly how the system that they are operating operates, and then compare that against the rules. Hosting allowing people to come over is fine. Allowing people to come over and do whatever they want may not be okay. And there's a lot of misunderstanding about precisely how the system that Coinbase has deployed works. I will be fair to Coinbase. I don't think they have said anything inaccurate. Marketing is marketing. I'm not claiming they've done anything that's wrong there. And they're not misrepresenting that they have a kill switch for the bridge and whatever stuff like that. The guy that runs the project has given talks in which he is open that they have training wheels. That's fine.
I want to get down to
other people have just decided that that's not the case.
So I want to get down to first principles first, because some of our audience out there have no real idea what we're talking about. So let's just go back down. Coinbase, cryptocurrency exchange, listed on NASDAQ. NASDAQ? Correct, NASDAQ. Yeah. And they have set up this thing called Base. In 10 seconds or less, what is Base?
So it's a centralized blockchain. Coinbase runs the only validator for. Coinbase runs currently the only bridge for. Coinbase acknowledges that they run it. So it may or may not be open source code, but it is a system completely operated and under the control of Coinbase. Coinbase says that in their marketing materials, their YouTube channel.
So that that has nothing to do with open source or permissionless. Now we get to the second question. Can anybody use Base?
Yes. So you can deposit money through their bridge
Yeah.
and then transact on Base, and then you can sort of withdraw. It's a bit complicated.
Okay, so when you say sort of withdrawal, now let's say I am anybody. Let's just say I'm John Doe. I go there. I want to use Base.
Yeah.
Can I do that?
Yes. There's no KYC.
Oh, no KYC, you say? That's interesting. But who's in charge then? Who runs the system?
So Coinbase runs the system. And again, we're not even saying that permissionless systems are a problem. The issue is that Coinbase is a regulated money transmitter, which it volunteered to do. And that's the tension here that's the problem.
Right. So for our viewers who may not understand, smart contracts and the rest of it, because it sounds all, pretty complicated. If I provide a environment that facilitates the commission of potential crimes, we're not saying crimes, but we're saying potential crimes, is that a problem for me?
I mean, it certainly might be, and it's particularly a problem for you if you have, again, signed up, applied for a license that requires you to have a surveillance procedure to prevent certain types of things from happening. And if you've signed up for that license, been granted that license, it's like you have a driver's license that requires you to follow the speed limit. You can't just decide you don't want to follow the speed limit, right? They have voluntarily opted into a system that imposes restrictions on them, and then they've released a system that cannot possibly comply with those restrictions. Now, again, I step back here for a second.
Sure.
It might actually be the case that it's decided, because these are legal questions and there's
Correct.
trial or whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe what they're doing is fine. My real concern, the real point we've been trying to make since this began, a week and a half ago, is if this is allowed,
Oh, it's off to the races.
it provides a trivial end run around an awful lot of regulations for a lot of financial institutions. Maybe that's what's going to happen. It does feel like whatever judge is going to say, this interpretation, whether it's right or wrong, because it's a little bit of a gray area here. Nobody's saying this is a 99%, 80, 20, 20, 80, whatever. Yeah. However, the implications of that are a complete rearrangement of the way these rules work. That seems like an unlikely ruling to come out. Stuff like that happens. It's pretty unlikely.
So yes, there is that possibility that we come into this whole, I wouldn't call it utopia, probably more dystopia, because it's dystopian in the sense that, correct me if I'm wrong, now would it be possible for a financial institution to go like, hey, that's a good way to do things. We don't have to KYC transactions. So let's say now I'm a bank and I go like, screw that, man. I'm just gonna start my own private, permissionless, centralized blockchain.
At the moment, the system is controlled by Coinbase. They are aspiring to decentralization.
I can aspire all day.
Yes, if aspirational decentralization is sufficient to be regulated like the Bitcoin network, then you're gonna see an awful lot of people aspirationally decentralized and totally centralized. You're definitely going to see that. Every bank will just
I'm sure that there's no shortage of criminals who aspire to come clean.
I didn't even mean that, but it's
I mean,
going to be a real problem.
I mean, like you've seen that in so many of the mob movies where like they do the racketeering and stuff like that, and then they want to get the casino.
It'd really
so
be
that
a shame if something happened to your deli.
Yeah, so that they can then maybe get a seat at Congress and that kind of thing. I mean, all these are aspirations.
Yeah.
So
it was a Twitter exchange I had with someone I don't remember. And their response was essentially, oh, well, if this is true, then Bitcoin would have been banned. Like, I think probably given the way things work right now, had everybody known where it was going to go, the government probably would have tried harder to get rid of some of this stuff. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm observing that that's true. Anyway, they managed to get themselves decentralized, and so now it's okay. But you can't start off centralized, ignore all the rules because eventually you think you'll be exempt, and assume that entire path is going to go well for you. Again, I'll be nice to Uniswap. The Uniswap contracts that were published are totally immutable.
Yeah.
They're just fine. Like
Good.
Those guys, okay-ish. They have a token, but it's.
So now that we're on the topic of immutability, perhaps a little bit of explanation might be in order right now. Tell us more about this immutability you speak of.
All right. So we're going to do a little bit of a technical summary of how some of this stuff works. So smart contracts, colloquially, are just programs that run on some blockchain that enforce whatever rules. Fine. On most smart contract platforms, when you publish whatever code, the code is fixed. So on Ethereum, the technical reasons that a particular contract isn't editable don't really matter. The hash stuff and publishing the random addresses. So when you publish code on Ethereum, basically you can't update that piece of code. The address that goes to, kind of not updatable. But because software often needs to be updated, a common thing that people do is they publish one contract that contains the address of the next contract, and then they update the first one. So while you can't change the code itself, you can call functions on it, and you can say, I've republished, now it's at address 427. Oh, the next version's at address 815, whatever it is. So what you've generated here is individual contracts that are immutable, but a system, a composition of programs where you can update versions. And that's fine if every time you're looking on Etherscan and you see something that says proxy contract, is this a proxy, read as proxy, write as proxy, all of that stuff, all that proxy stuff is about enabling some kind of upgradability in these systems. Fine. So you have systems where the contracts are completely immutable, and you have systems where the developers have the ability to upgrade those contracts. There is often a conflation of the two. Right? So people will say it's an Ethereum smart contract, so it's immutable. It's an upgradable proxy Ethereum smart contract, which means it's not immutable. I am aware that that sentence is quite technical.
Yes.
But there is a difference here, and people need to understand that there are ways in which programs on Ethereum are or are not fixed in stone. Now, I think I can tell where this is headed. Tornado Cash is an interesting situation that involves some of the issues we just talked about with smart contract upgradability and some of what we talked about with Coinbase and running a system. So this indictment, whatever over here, none of these people are charged with publishing code. That's not a crime. In the United States, you'd really struggle to find any way to charge somebody. They're charged with operating a business that did all kinds of stuff that it wasn't supposed to do. And all the allegations in here are about for profit, whatever.
Let me for our viewers, let me just read this first line. It's in the first paragraph. In the indictment, claiming to offer the Tornado Cash service as a privacy service, the defendants in fact knew that it was a haven for criminals to engage in large-scale money laundering and sanctions evasion. And in fact, if you read the indictment, it continues to go on to say, let's see here on page 9, paragraph 20, Roman Storm and Roman Semenov, is it Semenov or Semenov? Anyway, also encouraged customers of the Tornado Cash service to wait a period of time, for example, several days after depositing funds before making withdrawals in order to further disguise the link between any deposit and withdrawal. There is no real mention of just publishing code.
Yeah, so you can think these activities are right, wrong, whatever. Like you can have an opinion on those activities. We are expressing no opinion on those activities, except that they're not software developer activities. They're only incidentally software developers.
Generally, software developers don't say, by the way, so that nobody knows what you're doing, why don't you wait a couple of days?
I mean, now whether or not offering that advice is a crime is a legitimate open legal question, but it is not a question that has implications for software developers.
Yeah, it's not.
I think even beyond that, I don't know if you've highlighted any stuff related to the fact that they ran this as a centralized system.
Yeah.
Okay, please.
They use their own debit cards to pay for the web service.
They ran the front end as a centralized service in a cloud with VC money, apparently. Again, whether or not the front end is something that they get in trouble for, but these guys were definitely operating that. So they're not software developers; they're a business. They happen to also.
But let's talk a bit about the smart contracts, which is what I know you're getting at. So go ahead.
So they have a blog that is still up. It's fantastic. I hope Medium keeps this blog up, forever, in which they talked about their efforts over a period of time to decentralize the system. Very honestly, very openly. These guys were not misleading anybody about anything. And reading that blog and then reading the code makes it clear that this was a completely centralized system where the developers could arbitrarily update the code for significant periods of time when significant numbers of transactions went through it. It was not an immutable smart contract that no one could update. It was a mutable smart contract that only the devs could update. The act of writing the code isn't the problem, the operating of the system, operating a centralized such system. Similarly, they talk about their relayer network. It's another part of Tornado Cash. How this thing works is a separate discussion, and how those were all centralized services. And then eventually they released a decentralized network package, whatever. But this is years after this code was originally published. So again, people who are coming to this need to recognize two things. The system has existed in different forms over a long period of time, and the government can charge you for stuff you did in 2019, even if you're not still doing it, right? And the second one is that many of these contracts were completely centralized and mutable. These were not immutable smart contracts that sat on some IPFS thing and nobody could ever touch.
And the DOJ makes this clear in the indictment. The attorney the attorney for the Southern District of New York makes it clear here in paragraph 26 on page 12. Initially beginning in or about August 2019, the defendants exercised complete control over the Tornado Cash service. So this is important because it goes back to what we just spoke about. If you had aspirational decentralization, you've got real-time problems.
Yeah. I mean, they admitted publicly, openly, the blog is all in English, very, very accessible, that they ran a centralized system and they were trying to figure out how to stop that. Okay. And probably the current implementations of the contracts are whatever immutable. You can have a solid argument. I would support the idea that nobody can be charged for the stuff that that contract is doing now, ignoring the OFAC stuff, whatever, non-American, whatever, interacting with the contract now. But as of 2019, 2020, those things are still available. The facts may have changed or not. Make sure you know what the facts are and look at the time frame in which the crimes are alleged to have occurred. This looks like a pretty straightforward case to me, and they've arrested one of the dudes. So
He's on bail. He's on bail.
Whatever, but they're going to threaten him with a billion counts of whatever money laundering, get him to plead to something.
I
How
think-
the justice system works is not our.
Yeah.
Whatever. That's how it.
If I were to hazard a guess, he'd probably plead out.
Yeah, because hundreds of counts of money laundering is life in prison. So clearly he's going to.
Yeah.
You'd expect so.
Yeah.
I don't know how much luck they'll have getting. One of them is Russian in Russia.
Yeah.
So that guy's probably not getting arrested. But the other dude
Probably
who's in the
hanging out with
Netherlands.
Marcelic.
Whether or not it's Wirecard related, I couldn't help you with. Yeah, they two of the three of them, because it looks like there were basically three people who were developers and business owners.
Oh, speaking of three people, yeah. So if you have not read the indictment, I strongly recommend it. It's only 37 pages, a lot of white spaces. You should be fine. Two of the defendants are named, Roman Storm and Roman Simonov. Now, the third defendant, who, because this was a trio of guys who created this thing, he's referred to as, I think, CC1.
Co-conspirator one.
Yeah. He's not named, which
usually
usually means he's cooperating.
Yeah, and this is presumably Alexei Pertsev, who's been in and out of prison in the Netherlands for a while now.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll find out eventually. Maybe there's another person, but my understanding was...
I don't think so. I think that's him.
Contributor.
Yeah, it should be him. I mean, if I were to hazard a guess. Yeah. I think what's important is that have a read of it, because not just because then at least when you start randomly tweeting about stuff, your tweets make sense, which would be nice for a change. Don't have to. I mean, it's X. Who cares? But read it, because this is very likely looks like what's going to be the template for all the indictments that are coming down the road.
Yeah, so you're able to find, in this case, really nice public admissions of violations of a variety of money transmission type law things. And that's what they've been going after. So exchanges and whatever crypto services, not just in the U.S., but generally, people go after them for not doing the exchange stuff correctly and violating the money launderer, AML, whatever type stuff. It doesn't matter whether or not you agree with these laws. These are the current laws. Talk to the political system. That's a different podcast if you want to change the rules.
I guess you could write to your congressman.
Or whatever, the parliamentarian in your, whatever. This is not what we're doing here. Yeah, so this looks like exactly the types of rules that they put there. Yeah.
And interestingly enough, correct me if I'm wrong, John, doesn't this look a lot like the blog post that you wrote not too long ago?
It happens to look a tremendous amount like a blockhead column I wrote in, I think, April.
Okay, so we'll
to an uncanny degree, actually.
We will link that.
Yeah,
will link that blockhead piece that John wrote in April, I think, this year.
That's correct.
Because this indictment, I mean, bleep me, but it looks like a carbon copy of what you did.
Somebody footnoted my stuff and managed to get the NSA to get them transcripts of conversations that I don't have access to. And in fact, I will note that some of this stuff does include discussions about these guys using VPNs and Russian IP addresses and Binance to sell tokens and exfiltrate money. So I would not be surprised if you were coming into this industry from nowhere as a regulator that wanted to make a name for yourself, whatever it is, finding the Tornado Cash team, pressuring them and getting them to tell you what services they use to offer up their money seems like a reasonable place to start as an investigator. Again, we're not saying this is the right or wrong thing to do. We're observing that this is a thing that's going to happen, and reacting to stuff that happens in the real world is what people in markets are supposed to do.
The thing that always puzzles me is that sometimes the response to crypto Twitter, I mean, thank you for all the great responses. You guys have been awesome. Because you see, finally I feel like more adults are contributing to the discourse, which is good. I like that. That's nice. But then there remains a demographic that just refuses to handle to handle the truth. I mean, like, this is coming whether you like it or not.
Yeah, we don't hate privacy. We like acknowledging the realities of the world as they are. You're welcome to change policies. I don't necessarily agree with every law.
Oh, yeah, no.
Whatever. This is not the conversation.
But this is how it is.
Yeah.
Deal with it. So we talked about Coinbase. We talked about Tornado.
To be clear, there are people who have managed to address some of these problems and solve them in ways that are okay.
Yes.
If you take Uniswap as an example of something that seems okay-ish, but you use that method to publish a cryptocurrency mixer, it's clearly going to get OFAC'd, and then it's between you and the U.S. government to fight it out as to whether or not that's going to be usable. Don't do that. That's a waste of everybody's time. You can follow examples of things that do seem okay, whether they're legal or not or whatever. They seem okay. And, that's at least making a good faith effort to do things better.
I would argue that, if you went, like, let's say, for instance, if for some inexplicable reason the creators of Uniswap were hauled in front of, in court as well, they can actually kind of show that, substantial good faith effort was made to ensure these things didn't happen. But with the Tornado Cash guys, I mean the public statements, a lot of stuff is really tough even as a defense attorney to go and argue these things in court. Like
that's going to be a thing, right? There are going to be discussions. Questions of fact are settled by the jury, right? So there is going to be witness testimony if this thing goes to trial over whether or not these contracts were immutable, which is an interesting thing and probably will make a terrible scene in a movie someday. Jack Nicholson's not going to do a very good job as a witness on that one.
Okay, we'll probably have to cut out that bit. I'll just have to edit it out. So
that's fine, whatever.
Okay, anyway, finally.
It's Top Gear style. We'll fix that in post-processing and then never make any changes.
Finally, let's talk a little bit about the TRON Smart Contracts, because this is important.
So there are good tools for reading Ethereum smart contracts already that are out there, and for EVM compatible whatever stuff, so all the forks, I guess, or whatever reinstallations of Etherscan all work. Tron, there isn't quite so much of that kind of stuff going on. So we've been developing some tools to analyze smart contracts on Tron, and have been tweeting out some interesting stuff. The whole sheet
thing is fabulous.
is quite funny. I suspect there's an awful lot of Easter eggs and interesting behavior and things that are blacklistable in ways that people are probably not expecting. And again, this is all going to become important in understanding what protocols do and don't survive and what places are and are not okay to trade. Because the more blacklisting features, freezing features, withdrawal pause features type things are out there, the more likely your thing is to be ruled centralized and attacked. Whether or not you think that's right, those are the facts. And yes, it's relatively difficult to look at a lot of that stuff today. There aren't a lot of places, so we're trying to work on that to make that more usable. There should be some more interesting statistics. Obviously, you start by tweeting out just the crazy, funny stuff that you find.
The sheep one as well. Right, so that's it for this week. Thank you for tuning in. Always, please help us out. Smash that like and subscribe button. We like it when you do that. Appreciate it. Helps the algorithm. You guys have been great. Thank you for all that response for last week's episode. We really appreciate it. Appreciate all the comments as well, and all the shares and likes. So until then, we'll see you again next week. Thank you for tuning in. Bye-bye.